Welcome everyone, I'm Ian Patrick and welcome to another Frightening Friday flick. Tonight's Frightening Friday flick is The Revenge of Frankenstein. This film came out in 1958, just 1 year after The Curse of Frankenstein. So this is a sequel movie, and it's actually a continuation sequel, which I'm a huge fan of. It picks up immediately after what happens at the end of The Curse of Frankenstein. So if you haven't seen The Curse of Frankenstein, you definitely need to see that before watching this movie. So came out in 1958, stars Peter Cushing and also Francis Matthews. Cushing, he is playing Dr. Frankenstein again. However, in this movie, he changes his name to Dr. Stein, and that's the purpose of that, is to avoid the authorities. And Francis Matthews, he plays Dr. Hans Klev, and I like to reference him just because I feel like he did an outstanding job in this movie. This film was another Hammer horror film. It was directed by Terence and the time frame in the film is 1860 to 1863. So I'm gonna start out by saying you definitely should watch this movie. Usually horror sequels aren't that good, but this one definitely is almost as good as the first. So let's talk about the plot firstly. So Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, in the previous film, of course, he was sentenced to death by guillotine. So you think, okay, well, he's gonna die. Basically, that's the end of the story. Wrong. At the start of this movie, he is basically being walked up to have his head cut off, and he apparently somehow had befriended or made a deal with the people who were working the guillotine. They save him. They cut off the head of a priest or a preacher. I think it was a priest. Yeah, a priest. They put the priest's body in the coffin, so everybody thinks Frankenstein is dead, but really it's the priest's body in the coffin. So right away, pretty gruesome stuff. So Frankenstein, is he done with his evil ways of grave robbing? No. He's done with grave robbing, but I'll get to that. So Dr. Frankenstein, he moves to a different city. He creates a new identity as this Dr. Stein, and his practice is helping the poor, the uneducated, basically street people who have nowhere to turn. And I suppose he helps them out for free, but so it kind of looks like Dr. Stein has changed his ways, that he's not trying to create some monster again of dead body parts. And I want to talk about, I think that's the most disturbing aspect of this movie, is that he's not grave robbing anymore. He gets body parts from live humans. These poor people that he's helping in his little clinic or whatever, he is lying to them saying, hey, we need to amputate your ear. Hey, we need to amputate your leg. We're going to have to take that off. The only purpose for taking their limbs and body parts away is to create his new monster, his new human body. So it's very disturbing. If you sit down and think about it, it makes your stomach turn a little bit about what exactly he's doing. And the guy who saved him, he's a hunchback, and this hunchback says, I want to be your test subject. I want you to use my brain to put my brain into the new body that you're creating. So Frankenstein doesn't have to worry about finding a brain. He doesn't have to kill anybody to get a live brain, because this Igor type guy is saying, okay, I'll give you my brain if you give me a new body, because I want to have a handsome body. And so I don't want to give everything away, but that's basically the major setup. And also there's a whole interesting thing about this community board of doctors living in this city, they don't like what Frankenstein is doing, so they're trying to find a way to discredit Dr. Frankenstein. So there's always that going on in the background. They don't know that he's actually Dr. Frankenstein because he's changed his name to Dr. Stein. It's worth noting that this movie, Frankenstein movie, it went more with story rather than scares. In fact, that's pretty much the only complaint I have about this movie, is that watching it from this day and age, at least, it's not really scary, but it's disturbing, sickly disturbing. So it's not really frightening, scary. The monster isn't even scary in this movie, like Christopher Lee in the first movie. There aren't even really any jump scares in this movie, so you won't jump from your seat. But there are so many more pros to the film. Like I said, I love continuation sequels. Picks up right from the start, right from the ending of the first film. Cushing, of course, Peter Cushing is one of the most fantastic actors, really. He does an excellent job at acting, and so does Francis Matthews as his assistant, Dr. Hans Clev. And the scene that I really want to note the most is there's a scene where Dr. Frankenstein is teaching Dr. Clev, how the mind works. So he has a bunch of different body parts, including the human brain, and he shows how the brain reacts to a flame, such as the one right here. So he inches the flame closer and closer to the eyeballs, which are, I guess, connected to the brain. So the eyeball is watching, and it's connected, or actually no, there's no brain at this point yet, of course, but it's how the eyes are reacting to the flame. So it's watching the flame, and the hand is getting closer and closer to the flame, and he's just showing how the human body reacts to things like that. And it's a very interesting scene. Also, the body parts, the effects, and the sets are outstanding. The clothing that they wear are just perfect for 19th century. The costumes were great. The film has that 19th century feel to it. And this movie actually was a success. It's very well received by critics. Even today, people applaud it. It's worth noting the British Board of Film Classification back in the day, they thought it was just a horrendous movie, and they thought that there should be a new category of movies after seeing it called For Sadists Only. So they thought it was just so gruesome and disturbing. I guess that's kind of how I feel about Saw movies today. I think those are just for sadists only. But it was well received. During the filming of this, actually, they were also Hammer Horror. Hammer was making Dracula at the time, also with Cushing, and also directed by Terence Fisher. So both films were being made at the same time, and they were actually using the same sets in some of the scenes. Also, the Motion Daily Picture back in 1958 noted something very interesting, that Hammer really showed that horror films did not have to be in black and white to be scary, and that they quote that their use of color for frightening effects, end quote, were just perfect. And I totally agree with that. Basically every Hammer horror film that I've seen, the colors that they use just really give a unique feel to it. All those Edgar Allan Poe movies and I've reviewed previous ones in the past, but anyways, that's going to conclude this Frankenstein review. I know there's another one after this, so at some point I will get to that one. I hope you enjoyed this Frightening Friday flick. Definitely watch this movie. It's a must-see, especially if you've seen the first, because after you see the first, you're going to want to see what's going to happen to Dr. Frankenstein's character. It's very interesting stuff, but have a creepy night, guys.